as a bit of a wrap up. So, do we have any? We've got great attendance tonight because it's the last class. I guess that says something. Um, but who would like to begin? Sonia, do you have a question for John? You don't? All right. I'm sure somebody does.
Yeah, I'd be happy to
David?
jump in. I'm curious, John, if you feel that there's any material difference between how consumers interact with their phones, as we've used as an example, and cars, which have more, at least to me, of an external status symbol type element to them. People care that they're driving a fancy brand name car, and to me that gives some value to the actual OEMs or the existing players within the space. Do you see that distinction as important or not in your mind? And maybe we've lost John for a second.
No, just I didn't, as a high-powered software engineer, I didn't press the unmute button. I guess I view it as epiphenomenal to the whole thing, in the sense that we
can't see you, John. Have you turned off your camera?
Side of it, I think is
John, we've lost your video. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you've lost my video.
Yeah, so we can hear you fine, but
well, yeah, that's true. I just seem frozen in an attitude of deep thought. Okay, well let's I'll see if I can fix that when I'm not talking.
We're not even seeing that.
That's right. As David correctly pointed out, when I was talking about user experience, I was talking about the software side of it. But the reason that we buy cars is much more complicated than that, and there's many aspects to it. And this is where brand comes into it. And Apple has a bunch of brand attributes that are valuable, but they're very different from the brand attributes associated with, for example, Porsche. And it was interesting. Last year, I was invited down to the Porsche User Experience Research Facility, where they were running through a bunch of different trial ideas about where Porsche would go in the future. And one of the questions that they were asking people who own those cars at the moment is, how would you feel about an autonomous Porsche? How would is it inimical to the idea of owning a Porsche? And the feedback they got from me and a whole bunch of other people, as far as I could tell from talking with them, was that no, if the thing was always autonomous, that would be a problem. But the fact that it was autonomous in the right mode was simply evaluated feature. So stepping back from it, yeah, a whole bunch of different brand attributes. The question is whether or not those brand attributes can make up for the problem of trying to combine together an OEM user interface with another DSP interface.
Interesting. Thanks so much.
John, to build on Nicholas's question before we move on, you made at the beginning of the class this extremely bold statement: software is key, everything else is infrastructure. But I think you just basically admitted that human behavior might still matter. So are you going to modify your proposition to say software is key, except for human behavior?
Yeah, I mean, as an engineer, we always have a problematic relationship with human behavior. We're generally not in favor of it. And it's part of it. I guess what I'm arguing is that software is an increasingly part of the way that we interact with these systems. The underlying hardware is increasingly unimportant, and that's an important shift. human behavior is constant or evolving through it. But if you step back for the auto industry over the last, say, 50 years, in the 70s and through the 80s, the key differentiating factor was engine technology. That's where Honda got its start. That's where you saw that the Japanese manufacturers really evolving the capability of engines. From 1990 through really the present day, it's been much more about the electronics and the integration of these various hardware technologies than it has been about engine technology. And my argument is that in the next decade, it becomes increasingly about software, in particular, not about component software, but distributed software. And it's not that those other things go away. It's just that the driver for competitive differentiation shifts.
It's not about component, but about integration software. Is that what you said? Integration software?
The argument that I would like to make is that the auto industry is deeply familiar with component software. Every system inside a modern vehicle has software on top of it, from all of the engine control systems to the braking systems to the nav systems to the media systems. Everything is all connected together over very complex software controlled buses. The difference is when you go from component software to distributed system software, the competitive dynamics change fundamentally, and that's the difference.
Do we have another question or two?
We've got one from the chat, and so let me just present this. So in some cases, setting standards can create a larger market and ecosystem for companies to compete. The presentation painted standards as something that can be bad news for business in terms of limiting ability to create an appropriability regime. So the question is, when do you see it as strategic for a company to help set industry standards?
Yeah, if I could answer that, I should be working for Qualcomm. It is extraordinarily hard for reasons that David will be able to go into in much greater detail and with much greater authority than I can. The fundamental problem is that in order to build a sophisticated technology standard, let's make something easy. Let's talk about vehicle-to-vehicle communications. In order for active safety systems to work, what needs to happen is very, very low latency, very rich data communication needs to occur between vehicles. That requires standards at multiple levels, all the way down to the fundamental communications protocol, all the way up to what those protocols mean in terms of what the vehicle is going to do. Because what you want is, let's take the simplest possible example. If we've got two cars that are heading towards a head-on collision, you want them both to veer in the direction that will avoid the accident, but rather than both turning into each other. That requires vehicle-to-vehicle communications. Okay. There are going to be a lot of companies. In fact, there are a lot of companies that are competing to build those standards. One of them, two of them will become dominant. Once you've got those standards, how do you make money out of them? Well, the way you make money is if you can basically charge a reasonable return on the intellectual property that you've spent all the hundreds of millions of dollars developing. And a company like Apple does not want to pay for that and will fight all the way to the Supremes, if it possibly can, to avoid paying for that. And it gets very, very difficult because you're now in the realm of intellectual property enforcement. And as David will sadly tell you, in the US at the moment, that's a difficult place to be.
Is there another question there, Ian?
Yeah. Let's see. So are battery-powered vehicles naturally going to be the choice because automation of complex systems and fuel cell cars might be more difficult? And parenthetically, Apple and others have more knowledge about these types of platforms as well.
I missed the beginning, Ian. Say the beginning again.
Sure. So are battery-powered vehicles naturally going to be the choice because automation of complex systems in fuel cell powered cars is more difficult?
Yeah, if I had to bet, I would say the question about fuel cell versus battery for passenger vehicles and light commercial is done. Hydrogen is cooked. If we were talking in 2011 rather than 2021, maybe different. But the BEVs are on such a roll in terms of infrastructure, in terms of ongoing improvement in engineering. It's extraordinarily difficult to see how they'll be overcome. Hydrogen has some advantages, but the disadvantages that we can go into them are such that for passenger vehicles, it's really difficult to see how that you can come back. In long haul trucking, I think it's a very different situation. If the promoters of hydrogen get their act together, because the ability for hydrogen to be able to pack so much more energy into a reasonable space, reasonable weight, so that I can run a truck transcon so much better than Lion, that it really has a play there, and the infrastructure challenges are much simpler. But the momentum is a hell of a drug, and it's if the hydrogen guys need to get rolling if they're going to make this work.
So, John, I have a kind of a closing question for you. We still can't see you, by the way. If you don't mind switching your video on.
Well, I have actually, David. It's I can reboot WebEx, but I've tried stopping it and starting it and all the rest of it. It's all very confused. I wish I will. I'll reboot WebEx when we're done and then come back. But anyway, sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to point out to the class that, and it is very apparent that you've done an excellent job of showing how to use the profiting from innovation framework and the focus on figuring out where the bottleneck is, because that's where the money's going to go, and dynamic capabilities, which of course, it's not a static system at all, and the bottleneck keeps moving around. And in the context of one of the largest industries, which is automotive transportation, you've given us a great sort of vista into how you yourself have been able to employ those frameworks. But it's only one industry. As an executive and as a consultant, I know you've worked across multiple industries. So give me some sense of how, frameworks, theories, whatever, from the field of strategic management and technology management more generally, can help or get in the way of the kind of analysis that you have to do when you're looking at these big, complex, hairy, not multi-billion-dollar issues, but multi-trillion-dollar issues, because that's what you've been talking about here. So give us your insight onto that.
Sure. Let me try and do that.
Yeah, it would be good to have you on video for the grand finale.
Yeah. Should I? Can you say something profound for 2 minutes, and I'll reboot WebEx, and we'll see whether that helps.
Yeah, sure. And we've got IT person here if they can help you, or is it entirely at your end?
No, I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Get Smart, but my view of WebEx is that it's exactly equivalent to the cone of silence. It's just a more sophisticated version of it. I've never had it work reliably. I'll be back in just a second. Let's see whether it helps.
Yeah, sure. So let me just talk to the class here a little bit. Clearly what you're seeing is how hard it is and how context dependent just about every management question is. But at the same time, we don't want to lose the fact that there are general principles at work here, general principles of economic organization, general principles of strategy. And to quote Elon Musk, when he comes to a problem, he attacks things from what he referred to as first principles. And, I'd like to think that these frameworks, kind of enable you to go back almost to first principles, to think through complex strategic questions. So what I'm asking John to reflect upon is, he was a consultant early in his life. He was then an executive, and then he was a consultant again. In his later period here, he's actually been applying dynamic capabilities and profiting from innovation. And I'm hoping to get his views of when he was, I think it was BCG or Bain or one of those that he was consulting for many years ago, where, Bain did have a simple model, but it really was not kind of the level of apparatus, if you will, that dynamic capabilities or profiting from innovation is. So I'm hoping he's going to give us an endorsement, maybe he won't, that actually frameworks help. And if he doesn't, then obviously I've got a deeper accountability problem for you folks, because I've been making the argument that they do. So I'm hoping that he will have some modest amount of agreement with that principle and can go on to illustrate other ways in which those frameworks have assisted him as a consultant or as an executive.
And I'm back. So there
you are.
I think, David, it's interesting. In my background, as you noted, I've worked at small companies, but I've also done consulting work for large companies. And one of the ones that's interesting is back when I was in my late teens, I worked with Gerstner at IBM when the internet hit. And there were, Gerstner appointed a small group of internal IBM people and one or two external people, of whom I was one, to basically figure out what the implications were for the internet for IBM. And the parallels with dynamic capabilities are there in this sense, in that it was a period of enormous uncertainty. There was recognition by Gerstner and his direct team that the internet was a fundamental shift in the way that they needed to compete, and that it would have implications across all of their different businesses. And what we did, the first step was to spend several months working with internally inside IBM and externally with IBM's customers to basically understand what was going on. Because IBM at that point, being this vast enterprise, was really disconnected from what was changing out there as a result of the net. And looking back on it, it's very much the sensing phase of dynamic capabilities. But we didn't have that framework. But nonetheless, that's what it was. And out of it came a set of strategic choices for Gerstner and the executive team for the various businesses about what needed to be done in the mini computer businesses, the mainframe businesses, the operating system businesses, things like that. And they were scenarios in exactly the sense that you use them in dynamic capabilities. And again, we didn't recognize it as the framework, but nonetheless, it was exactly that framework. And So looking back on it now, I can see that the work that we did then fits exactly into the kind of paradigm that you've been proposing. The thing that we didn't do at IBM that is fundamental to dynamic capabilities is the iterative nature of it. The constant fine-tuning, working through sensing, sense-making around to be able to get the capabilities that one needs in order to be able to orchestrate the assets in the way that is necessary. So the framework, I think, is extremely relevant back in the day. So if we roll forward now from that period to, for example, Qualcomm, which is a more recent example, the Qualcomm is subject to the kind of challenges that I talked about in terms of communication standards. Qualcomm is now investing very heavily in advanced driver assistance systems and advanced active safety systems. They want to take their Snapdragon product and make an extensively evolved version of that for advanced active safety and driver assistance. The interesting thing about that strategically is that, again, under a dynamic capabilities framework, what you need to be able to analyze is what are the appropriability regimes that will be necessary to be able to get the return on this investment that is necessary. Because it's clear for Qualcomm that being able to obtain those adequate returns in the existing space has been challenging. So again, to be able to use this framework to be able to work through the issues, I think, is very valuable for that company.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And so if we've got these frameworks, it's a bit of a shortcut. You didn't mention profiting from innovation, whether that thinking was also used at IBM and elsewhere. That's a much more, it's not so self-evident as dynamic capabilities might have been, because you got this complex.
I think it's there, though, David. The challenge for Qualcomm in the existing communication space is the appropriability regime. It's an intellectual property protection framework is appropriability, and in the US, that's become remarkably weak. If you're Qualcomm and you're looking at ADA and AAAS systems in automotive, how do you break out of that? How do you end up being able to make money in an area where, again, there's going to be extensive standardization? And there are potentially ways to be able to do it. For example, as I talked about in the presentation, these systems, advanced active safety and driver assistance, they're distributed services platforms. Qualcomm has not historically done its own services, but it could. There's no reason why it could not. And those kind of services have very strong appropriability, very strong network effects. So it's an area that if I were they, I would aggressively pursue.
So they have to build a whole service organization for that, though, correct?
They would. Yeah. Life's hard.
Well, let's see if we have any more questions. If not, I'll thank you and let you go since it's the East Coast. Okay, John. Well, thank you very much. And I'll tell the class that you've made your slides available. Ian can get you the slides if he hadn't already done so. And we do appreciate all of that valuable intellectual property that you're willing to share with us. And we'll build on it and extend it and give you the benefits down the road, just like any open system works.
That would be terrific, and any feedback would be hugely welcome, as always. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, thank you, John. Good night.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. Well, class, I think this is probably a relatively good place to end. It's late and it's the last class, and I know many of you are still working on your term papers. What I would propose we do is I will stay on for another 15 minutes or so in case some of you have questions about your term papers or want to discuss anything. But let me just say what a pleasure it's been under difficult circumstances. You didn't go to Haas to get an online education. You went to Haas in part because of all the networking and all the on-campus things. And if in some small way I can keep interacting with you, then please reach out to me, and over the weeks ahead, I would like to engage with each one of you in some fashion, and try and give back a little bit of what we would have had we been on campus together. So thank you all, and I'm really looking forward to getting the term papers. That's actually, for me, one of the greatest delights is to see you apply these frameworks as John has just done. I know we all need to take a couple of aspirin because of the complexities of everything that is involved, but taking these frameworks and applying them in a way John was doing a term paper exercise. I'm not expecting quite as much from each one of you, but nevertheless, there was certainly a great illustration of the framework, although he didn't draw on it and refer to it quite as much as I would have liked, but the key principles were what was driving his investigation. So thank you all, and all the best, and I'm going to stay on for 15 minutes, but the rest of you can take the rest of the evening off, and rest assured that I'm looking forward to reading your papers. And I'm open, as is Ian, for further contact until you deliver those papers, and after you deliver those papers. I know many of you are putting a lot of effort into it, and if I'm not able to give you written feedback, don't hesitate to call me and we can talk about it. Thank you all. Good night. Well, not all of you. If some of you want to stay on, you can. If no one stays on, then I'll go off and have dinner as well.